We do wonder how long this optimism will last, especially this risk-on sentiment and the rotation to value to cyclicals, when at the same time markets seem to be pretty anxious about potential inflation.
That is completely correct, and I think it's the kind of double-edged sword that we are balancing. What is so important is looking at how pandemic restrictions are being eased, where the vaccine deployment is more advanced. This shows a direction as to a broader global normalization. And so knowing that there's this light at the end of the pandemic tunnel, I think is incredibly important to the bigger story. Now, whether or not these high yields that we're seeing might create a headwind for stocks, you know, it's not inconsistent to have high yields with stocks going up if growth expectations are a driver and not inflation. And I feel all of the indication that we're getting from the central bank is exactly that this is good news, that we are going to see economic recovery, we are going to see a reopening, and we're not necessarily worried about inflation, especially since jobs are so, the unemployment rate is still so high and the economy still has so much slack in it.
So how are you positioning your portfolio for that?
Well, we are of course long-term investors, and so for us it's always taking a balanced view. We are rotating out of some of those big mega cap tech names. It doesn't mean abandon ship. It just means right-size the position and trim them down, knowing that higher interest rates are going to have a negative impact on growth valuations, and reposition tactically for those value names that we think are going to be better positioned. And so we tend to like those more cyclical types of investments. We like small versus large cap. We like developing versus developed. We like Asia ex-Japan. We think that it's well priced. And particularly we like Chinese equities. We think that there'll be robust earnings trends. And we think that there's very supportive monetary policy behind all of that. And so we think that really that
Angela,
cyclical trade is one very tactical.
Right, Angela, let me get your sort of more details on your constructive view on Chinese equities, because obviously we have seen this sell-off. It's somewhat stabilized. Does that mean you're buying the dip, and if so, what?
We like the dip. If you know, I'm a sucker for you know, a bargain. We like consumer durables and services. We think all those positioning in the digital economy will do well, financials, and also thinking about just infrastructure. And this feeds into not just in China, but where we see tailwinds globally, and that's in the sort of renewable space, the sustainable investing space, because a lot of these economies have positioned themselves for building back better and committed to a climate agenda. Which should bode well in terms of investments, in terms of subsidies towards those more climate-related, more renewable types of investments, and that includes those in China.
Do investors really start looking to the next big infrastructure long-term stimulus package, given how hard a fight it was to get this short-term package through? Is there a concern about that not being delivered, or at least in the boon way that the markets are expecting?
Yeah, that's such a good question. The biggest thing that I've been hearing from everybody from Washington and all the way to Wall Street is, did it have to be so big? Did we have to have a $1.9 trillion fiscal stimulus package here in the U.S.? And just to quote the Federal Reserve Chair, Jerome Powell's words that he's repeated again and again, is basically it's better to go too big than too small. The risk of having too little stimulus is too big, given where we are in sort of a tentative middle zone where you know, we really want to see the reopening, we really want to see growth, and yet there's so many things that could derail it. I mean, even just with the pandemic, I mean, we're seeing all these new strains. We are just chugging along as if everything's going to be hunky-dory on the vaccine, but there are things that could derail that. And so I think going bigger on the stimulus package was an important signal to the market, and particularly for lives and livelihoods, that $1,400 check is going to be incredibly important.